Welcome to The Cat and the Parrot. Okay, I have lots of questions and I've been doing quite a lot of research. In fact, I've been on a course about it as well, about supervision. So about a year and a half ago, Keeping Children Safe document talked about the possibility of making compulsory for safeguarding leads to have supervision. Around that time, suddenly every DSL panicked because they didn't know, A, what supervision was, what was the difference between supervision, coaching, mentoring, all of those kind of phrases. And then B, where do we get this supervision from? And which kind of supervision model should we be looking at? And then, I mean, I went on a course and it was mainly focused on how I give supervision to my DSP team. It didn't answer my questions of, where can I find supervision for me that's going to be useful, that's going to fit in with me, and that gets schools? Because I got very confused with whether I was looking for supervision being a counsellor, or I've got so many questions there. I've thrown them all at you.
Right. So I'm a social work manager, as you know, okay, and I trained to be a social work manager back in 2003, and part of that role was providing supervision to my team. So in social work land, we have supervision every 3 weeks, under the grounds that if you can't make it that week because of a crisis, we've got the next week. So we shouldn't go more than 4 weeks without supervision.
Okay.
And supervision is normally, so as a social work manager, my remit was managing the cases in the team and instructing my staff on what's happening next. And they've been trained in a way that I've been given them a task, they've done it, give me the feedback, and I make a decision about open closing. I'm also aware as a manager that I had to make the decision about closing cases and open cases.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's always in my back mind as a manager, in that sense of public sector frontline child protection teams or social work teams. So again, in supervision with social workers, we talk about first their well-being in the sense of how they're coping, because we're aware it's an emotive job, all right? And they're exposed to reliving some trauma again and again.
Yeah.
And then we also are aware of deadlines in a sense of assessments, etc. So there's an element of that, and also personal might come into that, because we're human, we've got a life after work. So then, I hope so. We used to, but yeah, we should do. Okay. And we used to before this happened to COVID. So let's put it down to that. So with that in mind, we talk about cases. So I'd read through cases of the last cases of supervision we had, and then they'd update me.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we go down the route of any new cases you want to bring in, or new stuff. So that makes sense. So we're talking about things that are challenging for them. So if they've got, for argument's sake, 12 cases, we're aware of the status of the 12 cases. And I'd expect them, like if there's a child protection plan coming along, I'd expect them to look at risk, etc. Yeah. But the lower level ones, they'll know, so we would eventually talk about every case, put it that way. But they talk about cases, and I might say, right, I want you to now, we're going to close that case, blah, blah, blah. I make the decision.
Yeah.
And then we talk about training needs, we talk about other things like annual leave, etc., etc. Right. So that's the supervision session. And it should be as open and honest. You do a supervision agreement at the start about ground rules, etc., etc., all that. And then what I've seen in the school model is something similar where now, and we mentioned this in one of our other sessions, didn't we, Kerry, about you guys are the unqualified, I think I wrote an article about it as well, unqualified social workers or social work assistants of the 90s or early noughties that we had. And when I was in teams, we had quite a few. They were really good. A lot of them were just as good as, in the sense of without the piece of paper.
Yeah.
Qualified social workers. And obviously those disappeared. Family support workers, whatever they were.
Yeah.
And now we've got you. So now, unfortunately, the schools are that model where you have got those low risk, the child in need cases that would have been held by them, early help, etc. So exactly, one could argue that, have you got the skills to reflect? Because in our training, we're taught about reflection, theory, dynamics, systems in families, what's going on, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then we've got a way of working where sometimes we get so caught up in the rescue mode, in that sense.
Yeah.
And we're so involved, we're emotionally involved. And that's what supervision is really good at, detaching yourself as a third person and looking in.
Yeah, I mean, teachers, we are, I suppose we are reflective a lot with we're used to observations, with lessons, we're used to being judged quite well, but reflective on something personal is a very different thing. And you've said it before, that your own personal baggage, your own personal issues, sometimes it's hard to separate them or remove the layers, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what I hear quite a lot is sometimes it could be something that happened many years ago. You know, it could be something that's current now. But the reality is, sometimes, and I had experience myself with some of my social workers where stuff are going on and they block it and they're in denial about it. But because of that, they haven't got the right thinking hat on, and therefore might miss something. So that's the part about your human, i.e. out of work stuff. Two, this family's, you're intimidated by them, or they remind you of another family. You know what I mean? So all of those things come into it, and you don't recognize it when actually, or you want to rescue this child and you're not having it. Do you understand? So there's an element of, you don't see it clearly and you get too involved. And that's why I think the reflection's really good, because you then get the message of your limitations of the max of what you can do. So what comes out quite a lot in the external, in that kind of, you know, school model would be, you've referred it to social care, they've made the decision. Okay, do you understand? Or sometimes it's about, you haven't rang social care, now you recognise you need to. Okay. Or child hasn't said anything yet, but maybe we should do some work in that setting or in that school or in that class. So I had recently ones where they're concerned about domestic abuse. So there are lots of books where you can talk about story where there's a dominant person in the story, blah, blah, blah. So that could trigger to say, that's what happens at my house when my brother comes home. So you are amazing at that, in being that proactive place where you can almost, you know, encourage children to say, So when things have been, sometimes with Operation Encompass, as you know, you don't get the detail or nothing has happened. And I will say, well, go back with some of those books or those themes and then see if the child accidentally says something, because they're so innocent and pure most of the time in that, you know, sense, that they might say something without recognizing they're telling you the story.
So the supervision could be a chance of reflecting, but also trying to move forward with cases. It could give you another idea and another stepping stone for it.
Or even training needs. You might recognise. You might recognise that actually I don't know a lot about affluent neglect. You might recognise that actually I am intimidated by this father who keeps emailing me 12 o'clock at night, and actually I'm justifying my actions here. And actually I'm now caught up in this. Or what quite common actually, Kerry, is when you get involved in those cases of control, and now you're supporting the person who's been controlled, okay, or harmed. The person who's been the harmer or the person who's been accused, then you're the attack. You're then the person in the firing line. And you don't recognise that. Because they're thinking, you know, how dare you? Whatever. And you don't recognise it.
And they normally find the one thing that you have done wrong, or the one thing that maybe you didn't quite say or you didn't document, and you suddenly do feel guilty. Oh, you're right. I didn't do that bit.
Inform me about that time, when actually, you know, 80% of it is about them.
Exactly.
You know, even more than that.
Hard though.
I know.
You mentioned contract really quickly. That's quite a scary word to say, a contract before supervision. That's quite...
All right. So what I meant, I'll rewind. What I meant was, we have a safeguarding supervision agreement. Okay. And it's like, for example, I remember my first one I had with as a social worker to my social work manager when I first qualified in the mid-90s. All right. And I remember she was a lovely lady, a very kind of middle-class English lady, very lovely lady, and woman, sorry. And she was very clear about our different, who we are as different people.
Right.
And she was very open-minded and said, actually, Anne-Marie, at the time, I think she was about 50-something, as a 55-year-old middle-class white English lady, I'm aware that my experience would be different to yours. At the time I was 20-something.
Okay.
And obviously I'm aware of where we're working, to the point of how families are. You know, you've been a young person, a female, you know, person, etc., black woman, etc. And the intimidation that might come with that, in the sense of other people to you. And, you know, I want you to be aware of it, but also be open in our conversation about it. So that was really amazing for me, because then I could be honest about how I felt, but also difference, power imbalance, but also we agreed that she's there to help me and support me as well as direct me.
So it's like setting a tone then, really.
Absolutely. And sometimes we might disagree. So there has to be a third person. in this marriage, that person to go to, if I know, awkward, but to go to externally.
Yeah.
If,
Okay.
for example, you had to, if you didn't agree,
Okay.
and that might be her line manager
Okay.
or the assistant manager. There had to be another person in case we had a disagreement.
Yeah.
And then also you spoke about in the agreement, confidentiality.
Yeah.
If you're worried about another person.
Yeah.
etc.
Okay.
etc. So
All right.
it's
That's
around
useful.
rules.
Excellent. Okay. Good to know. Thank you very much.
No problem. Speak to you in a
Bye-bye.
bit. Bye.